Okay, good evening. So we're continuing this mini-series on important women in Jewish history. This is definitely not an exhaustive list, but different women that are worth talking about, and there's a lot of them. So we talked about Beruah, we talked about Rachel, Rabbi Akiva's wife. Here's one that's from a different time period, a more contemporary, a woman of import, Nechama Leibowitz. Nechama Leibowitz. You heard of her before? Yeah. Okay. So this is her book. There's a full set of this. This has been proved very helpful for me in my career. Her book is New Studies in Shemot, Bereshit, all the 5 books of the Torah. It's so good because she takes a topic, like 6-7 topics per parsha, and she'll show you like 5 or 6 different commentaries on it. Sometimes she expresses her opinion, a lot of times not. It's just a general overview of different approaches. It's great for Divrei Torah. It's great to go into another layer of depth in the parsha, and it's very organized. And she has questions at the end of each parsha for further review and additional sources. So this is just like if you were looking for a book for like another layer, like a little bit deeper into the parsha, but not too deep where you get overwhelmed and confused. This is a really good book. So you can get on Amazon. I highly recommend this. So it's a new Nechama Leibowitz. So who was she and what makes her so important and special? So let's give you a little bit of background info. She was born in Latvia in 1905. She lived till 1997. In 1930, she, at age 25, she received her doctorate. She was a pretty smart woman. She also had a pretty smart brother. Anybody know who her brother was? Yeshayahu Leibowitz. He was a chief, like a genius. Like he taught in many different areas in the university and many different faculties. He had a PhD, he had multiple PhDs. He was also a Jewish philosopher, and so he's really worth knowing about him. So, a smart family. And at age 30, she got married. She moved to Israel. She taught a Zionist teacher seminar for the next 25 years. She also is a professor. And what stands out to me about her personality, talked about Beruah. It seems like through adversity, she was able to find success and find strength and strengthen other people. We talked about Rachel. She was play more of like a supportive role. Nechama Leibowitz, what seems to stand out to me was her humility. There are many examples of this. One example is I learned under rabbis who learned under her when I was in the Gush. And in Israel, Gush Etzion, Alon Shvut, a lot of my rabbis learned under her, and like they told me, I forget which setting it was, maybe when she came to speak in the synagogue or something, that she used to come and the men would listen to her, and she would talk from the other side of the mechitza while they were listening. Perhaps there was maybe at that time she wanted it to be closed. I don't know what it was, but she would come and she would do that because she knew people wanted to learn. Whatever she had to do to teach Torah, she was willing to do that. And I remember they shared that story with me. But there are many more examples of her humility. But before I get there, though, I just want to talk about what makes her teaching unique. She studied in universities. She had her PhD in biblical studies, but she didn't really feed into the biblical critics' approaches. She more highlighted the multiplicity of views on every topic, and that's why she's popular today, because I think today people are looking for a multiplicity of views on multiple things. In addition, ever heard of this idea, what's bothering Rashi? Ever heard that someone say that? So apparently she was one of the people who started that. This idea that Rashi isn't just randomly quoting sages. Something's bothering him at each time when he says something, and he chose this answer as opposed to other words of the sages, because he's actually providing a commentary. He's not just quoting rabbinical texts. And so she was the one who started with that. She has a whole system of how to learn Rashi. So she really kind of brought that to the fore. So those are 2 things that stand out in her path. Now this book, Studies in Shemot, this started out in a really simple way. Her students, it was in 1942, they wanted to learn more from her after the semester was done. So they asked her, "Can you send us more material?" It's really nerdy students. So she goes, "Okay." So she sent out questions to them for them to answer. They would answer and look it up, send it back to her, and she would correct it. And one person told another person, before she knew it, there was thousands of people she was sending out her questions and answers to. Through time, they put them all into a book, and that's how they have this book. So it started out, it's called Gilionot, which is which means I guess like question and answers. So that's how that started. In terms of her humility, so she didn't want to be called professor or doctor. She said, "Call me Nechama," and so everyone called her Nechama because that's what she wanted. On her graveside, she wanted them to just write Nechama Leibowitz, teacher, and they did. She didn't want anyone to eulogize her at her eulogy, and they respected that. But since she passed away, like a lot has been written about her, and like I'm telling a story about her, so that I guess wasn't followed as much. But she also people wanted to come to just be with her and meet her in her house, and she used to say, "Don't come to me. I'm not a museum." She didn't want to just have people come make pilgrimages to her house. Another story that stood out. Another thing was she was a very intelligent woman, but she still was very traditional. So she wanted to retain and maintain the roles. She had this statement where she says, "Torah study constitutes gratification for women, and to take this intellectual enjoyment and activity take away this intellectual enjoyment and activity is an injustice. But when it comes to keeping mitzvot, you just have to do what God says." So she had this, on one side, she was very progressive in terms of her teaching and her academic acumen, but on the other hand, she wanted to maintain the traditional roles for women and men. And that's perhaps why she remained within the rabbinic circles, like the ones I was in, and they quoted her a lot. But I think what stands out the most to me about her personality was this idea that on one hand she knew who she was. She knew she was a very intelligent woman. She knew she had new Torah to teach, and she didn't shy away from that. She sent out her emails, her mail to people. She went to my rabbis and taught them behind the mechitza. She did what she had to do. On the other hand, she remained humble, and I think that's what really stands out in her personality. Now, she was never able to have children, and she said she would have given it all away in order if she could have just had children. Now, at her funeral, and this stands out, also her humility. The fact that people felt so connected to her. At her funeral, her nephew stood up and he said, "All those who feel as I do, like a son to Nechama, join in the Kaddish prayer with me." And at her funeral, it says thousands got up and they all rose and said, "Yikadal v'yikadash Shemei Rabbah." So that's a tribute to the kind of person she was, the deep Torah she taught, and the deep humility that